When it comes to Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions, over the years they have been able to build themselves a huge ring of armor in being able to justify the decisions they've made. But one such decision now is coming under scrutiny from some fans. We're going to talk about it, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. It doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, as I said in my intro, when it comes to the Detroit Lions, and when it comes to Brad Holmes, and it comes to the whole process, there have been relatively few areas where either Lions fans or outside fans, whether they're, how do I put this? Whether they're fans of the Lions or not, whether they're haters, whatever the case might be, there's very few areas where people can honestly complain about the team's process or find fault in the team's decision-making. However, where this has been a long source of no debate, a place of strength for the Lions in most recent years, there are now some people that have come to start actively questioning on one of the Lions' biggest trades that they made in the early days of the Holmes-Campbell tenure. And this whole questioning, this whole, kind of criticizing of the whole situation, it's starting to gain steam and it's starting to gain consideration in the Lions fan community. Now, if y'all remember your most recent Lions history, which I'm pretty sure most of y'all do, the Lions have really only pulled off two blockbuster player trades. One to trade for a player, one to trade away a player. Now, I'm going to say this. Nobody of any credibility is going to say that when the Lions traded for Goff by trading away Matthew Stafford, that was anything but an unqualified success. The Lions have used that trade to build the team. They've got themselves a franchise quarterback. They've gotten 2 divisional titles, playoff wins. It's been an unqualified success for them. So that leaves only one other trade. And the trade that I'm talking about that's in question is the TJ Hockenson trade, which recently a prominent podcaster made some comments stating that the trade was a mistake for the Lions, as it went wrong for them. But in what way is that even possible? So when I took a look at this, I said, okay, let's first examine the background of the trade and why it happened, because that's important to know. When we take a look at Hockenson, he in his own right is a damn good receiving threat as a tight end. And he's definitely a player that every offense would want and every QB would love to have as an option to throw to. But, as us Lions fans already know, the issue with Hockenson was never the fact of his ability to catch. We knew he was a great pass-catching tight end. Rather, his issue was his blocking. That's the funny part, is that coming out of Iowa, and Iowa's considered the tight end factory of the NCAA, they're considered to be the top tight ends because they're usually considered the best well-rounded tight ends and ready to play at an NFL level. And while Hockenson definitely proved he could play at an NFL level as a pass-catching receiver, his blocking just never really got much better from when he was in college. And that was one of the biggest areas that a lot of people had with Hockenson is like, yeah, you know what? This guy, we can use him as a threat and as a weapon in our offense, but when it comes time to actually needing him for running help as far as blocking is concerned, it's kind of hit or miss. And so with that inconsistency in there, that was where there were starting to be some problems when it came to Hockenson because, again, like I said, Hockenson was nowhere near as good as a blocker coming out of college, and it didn't seem to get any better once he got to becoming a pro. And when you think about it, the Lions, they use their tight ends heavily as part of their run-blocking offensive scheme. And that proved to be a problem. And, well, it came time for when Hockenson was going to want himself a new deal. And, it's understandable. He had proven himself to be one of the better tight ends as far as a receiving threat in the NFL. And on top of that, he was one of the few bright spots that the Lions had early on in the Holmes-Campbell era, and also from the forgettable Quintricia era. But the Lions realized even back then that paying Hockenson what he was asking for, it was simply just not a smart venture. And ultimately, it was a leading reason as to why the Lions were looking for and ultimately found a trade partner with the Vikings. Now, when you take a look at the trade itself, the Vikings, when they made the trade with the Lions, they gave the Lions a 2023 second-round pick and a 2024 third-round pick, which the Vikings obviously in return got Hockenson, but they also got 2 fourth-round draft picks. They got a 2023 fourther, and they got a 2024 fourther. So, the question is then, how is this trade a mistake or gone wrong for the Lions? Because I'm going to tell you this right now, it sure as hell isn't due to the Lions' replacement tight end that they got in Sam Laporta. No way in hell. Because if you take a look at Laporta over the past 2 seasons and compare him to Hockenson over the same time frame, it's clear that the Lions made out like damn bandits in regards. They made a damn smart decision there. And let me show you exactly what I mean. When you take a look at the production that Laporta has had versus what Hockenson has had, you're going to get a very, very clear picture here. Take a look first at Sam Laporta's numbers since, 2023. 4th most receptions by a tight end, 5th most targets by a tight end, 4th most receiving yards by a tight end, 6th highest pass average per catch, and tied for 1st for most receiving touchdowns. That right there is a top 5 tight end producing right there. That is what you want to see. So, Laporta's already proven his worth. Now, what about Hockenson? What has he done since he went to the Vikings? Well, he's been pretty good for them. He's been 8th in terms of total receptions, 6th in terms of total targets, 6th in terms of receiving yards, tied 11th in average per catch, but only tied 15th when it comes to receiving touchdowns. So, okay, right there you already got a pretty clear picture of where I'm going with this. Based at just looking at these 2 profiles of stats, the Lions made a smart move in moving on from Hockenson for Laporta. One, Laporta is a significantly better blocker, and thus a better scheme fit for what the Lions want to do in their entire offense, not just their passing offense. Second, Laporta is more durable than Hockenson, which has allowed him to outperform Hockenson in a number of areas. Even before Hockenson had the injury at the end of, 2022, the end of 2023, pardon me. Hockenson always had this issue of where it was like, hey, we're never going to get him for a full season. You're probably going to lose him for a couple of games here or there. And that's continued to remain to be the case for the most part. But other than that, the other biggest difference is the scoring production. I mean, even if you were to try and say if Hockenson could have played the majority of the time that, he was supposed to have played, you're still talking about 12 less receiving touchdowns. That's a huge drop between what Laporta was able to put up versus what Hockenson was able to put up. And when you think about all of these different things that are going on here, the fact that there's that much difference, that much of a discrepancy between these two, you then take a look at the fact that Hockenson got paid a $66 million deal once he got to the Vikings. Laporta, on the other hand, has outproduced him, especially in the scoring component, by 340% exactly. But yet, how much is Laporta making compared to Hockenson? Dude, that is where this gets really fun. Because let me tell you something, when I start taking a look at stuff, I go all out. Let me show you all something here. Here's Laporta's payout, if you will, for each statistic. So for every catch, every yard, every touchdown he's had. He's gotten paid just a little under $40,000 for every catch that he's made with the Lions. He's gotten paid $3,600 for each yard that he's gotten. And he's gotten paid a little over $342,000 for every touchdown he's grabbed. Okay, keep those numbers in mind because now I'm going to show you what Hockenson's payout has been for the same stats. Hockenson has been getting paid almost $220,000 for each catch, almost $21,000 for every yard, and almost $6 million for each touchdown that he's grabbed with the Vikings. Now, I'm not a mathematician, and I sure as hell ain't an accountant, but even I can tell you right then and there who's getting paid way more for producing much less. Now, here's where we're going to go even further with this. Let's look at how much total money and the total percentage difference there is between Laporta versus Hockenson. When you take a look at the total cash that is being saved from every stat that we're talking about, the catches, the yards, and the touchdowns, this is what you're going to see. The Lions are saving almost $180,000 per each catch. That's almost 450% savings. Then you take a look at the yards. They're almost saving $17,500 per yard. That's almost 484% savings. And for touchdowns, oh good Lord, they're saving $5,600,000 per touchdown, which is almost 1,650% savings. So let's get this straight. The Vikings, since signing Hockenson to his new deal in 2023, which was when that new deal first got started, they have paid him a grand total of almost $30 million in cash. Whereas the Lions, on the other hand, have only paid Laporta pretty much $5.8 million. Stark difference. That's a very stark difference. In fact, you want to know what the difference between that is? That's almost $24 million difference. All the while, the Lions have gotten more production out of Laporta while paying him significantly less and saving an immense amount of money in the same, breath over the last 2 years. So I'm telling you this right now, just from the monetary component, as well as the generic stats component, the Lions made out like damn bandits when they got Laporta. But the other thing we have to consider is the difference in terms of Jared Goff's production between these two guys, because Goff threw to both of them. How's that been different? I'm going to tell you this right now. When I started looking at the stats, I was actually really surprised at how damn different the numbers were. Take a look at what Jared Goff's stats were throwing to Hockenson for 2021 and 2022, for like the half season he was here. It's not too particularly inviting. Goff completed almost 70% of his passes and almost 1,000 yards, but he had almost the same amount of touchdowns to interceptions while throwing to Hockenson's way, which is for 90.5 passer rating. That's pretty much average. The only reason that the rating is that good is because of the completion percentage. When you've almost got the same amount of touchdowns and interceptions, I'm sorry, that's not good, and I'll be the first to say it. So it's like, okay, here, that's Hockenson. What the hell does Laporta and Goff look like? Oh, good Lord, it is a completely different story. I'm going to show you the stats, and then I'm going to show you the net gain on the same thing. When you take a look at how Goff has been with throwing to Laporta, Goff has completed almost 75% of his passes, over 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns with 9 touchdown percentage per throw almost, only 5 interceptions, with a 116.8 passer rating. Take a look at that net gain on the side. It says 423.8%. That's almost 425% difference. And the reason I got to that number is when you take a look at the minuses for the interception and the interception percentage, that's actually a positive for the quarterback. So that gets factored in. So think about that. Jared Goff with Sam Laporta was able to outproduce TJ Hockenson to the tune of almost 425%. I'm sorry. That is not something that should happen. And I'll tell you why it shouldn't happen. Because first and foremost, Hockenson was a veteran tight end. He was considered already one of the better ones when Goff and him got, paired together in that offense. But yet think about this. Sam Laporta comes in as a rookie, and in his first 2 years outperforms Hockenson, who had already been there since, 2019? Something like that. And then think about this. For those who want to say, oh, it was all about Ben Johnson. No, it wasn't. I've already had this conversation, but let me just put it to you this way. Ben Johnson was the tight ends coach and then the offensive coordinator with TJ Hockenson for the first 2 years that he was there. And then he became the offensive coordinator when Sam Laporta showed up as well. So it's like, both of these guys had the same coaches. In fact, one of them had more direct access to Ben Johnson than the other did. So think about that. If Hockenson, as a savvy veteran, was not anywhere coming close to being able to produce on the same level when Goff was throwing to Laporta, that right there is a huge red flag. That right there ought to tell you, okay, the Lions made a massively smart decision here. Because again, what are the three positions that most people say are the hardest to transition from college to the NFL? Quarterback, tight end, and cornerback. So think about that. For a tight end to come in and in his first 2 years, brand spanking new to the NFL, he's outperformed a veteran. That right there is interesting. That's big news. So again, as I've clearly shown, sorry, my paper was crinkling there. As I've clearly shown, not only have the Lions gotten more from Laporta in comparison to Hockenson directly, they've saved a crap ton of money, and on top of that, Jared Goff has produced immensely better with Laporta. So again, where is this whole idea that somehow this trade was a bad one? The idea comes from the whole thought process about the trade compensation. That's where this main podcaster is coming from, the main writer is coming from. And for me, I'm just going to say this. The fact that you want to make the argument about the trade compensation and as far as what you did with that to me is a huge error because you've completely now glossed over and not addressed any of the pretty much information that I just did, which all of that is extremely relevant when you're talking about this issue. Because according to the writer, those trade picks that we got and then used, that's where the issue is because of what we got versus what the Vikings got with the trade. Because, oh yeah, who did the Lions get? Well, the writer pretty much pointed out it was Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin, and Antoine Green. The Vikings got J.J. McCarthy. So, let's understand something here. The Lions got a backup quarterback, they got a backup wide receiver, and they got a backup defensive tackle. While the Vikings got a potential, heavy emphasis on that word, potential starting quarterback. That's one way to look at it. I know it's simplifying it quite a bit, because I know for a growing number of Lions fans, the issue isn't as much as who was selected versus as when and what was used to get them. I'm going to say this right now. When it comes to the whole Hendon Hooker situation, I hate saying it, but I tried to warn y'all. I seriously tried to warn y'all. I know so many people who are like, oh yeah, Hendon Hooker's going to become the next great thing. Hendon Hooker's going to be the franchise quarterback. And I was like, dude, time out. It ain't going to happen. He's 25 years old. He's coming off a non-contact injury to his ACL. He's coming from a non-professional scheme of offense in college. This guy's not going to be the starter. And if he does, it ain't going to be anytime soon. But ever since, it looks like the Lions are not very confident in him, more and more people have come to this thought process that, oh, well, the Lions might be wanting to move on from him. Maybe he was a reach. Maybe the Lions shouldn't have drafted him in the third round. I tried to tell you all that back 2-3 years ago. I was like, listen, Hooker should not have been drafted where we drafted him. He should have probably waited at least another round. But the Lions wanted to take him in the third round. I can't argue with what's been done. But here's what I will say. Y'all said you needed the Lions to get a backup quarterback. I'm going to say this right now. When it comes to backup quarterbacks, they are just, if not as hard to find than a starting quarterback. Hendon Hooker has talent. There's no debate on this. But when it comes to the whole situation, you're going to honestly get all upset and in a tizzy because we used a third-round pick on getting a decently quality backup quarterback who, hey, you know what? We haven't seen him really been used yet, but we know that he has talent. And I know everybody's basing this off of what happened in the playoffs when we put in Teddy Bridgewater versus putting him in. But it's like, listen, the Lions obviously went with the decision they thought was the best one. You can argue and say that that was the wrong move, but the point of the matter is it doesn't really change anything. Hendon Hooker's the backup quarterback. He's now obviously going to have to compete with Kyle Allen for that spot when obviously training camp starts. But again, we all know the competition is supposed to make the player better. The Lions have made this abundantly clear. They're not going to give a job just to anybody. You have to earn it. And obviously they feel that Hendon Hooker has not earned it yet. So there's that one. Then you get to I'm going to say this one. This is the one that I will agree with people on, the Broderick Martin selection. This is one where I agree with fans because of the amount of capital that was given up for Martin was definitely a lot, especially for a guy who has struggled to show consistent development to get on the field. But at this point, again, while the cost is definitely stinging, the Lions have established a whole bunch of internal defensive line depth. And again, they continue to believe that Martin will blossom, albeit at this case, it'll be a late blossom or a late bloomer. The whole point of the matter is that, again, I know that for Lions fans, the issue with Broderick Martin is how much that was given up for him. They're wanting him to show and result out on the field. But it's like, again, when you have all these guys that are in front of him, you have to prove that you can play at that level, and you have to prove that you belong out on the field versus somebody else. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time for people. And I know that when it comes to Lions fans, at least in this regard, they are not particularly patient. Now, when it comes to Antoine Green is a late round pick who many people had overly grandiose aspirations for, in my opinion, because the Lions already have two great wide receivers in J-Mo and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they also have a good one in Tim Patrick. Green was a 7th round draft pick. There's no reason for anybody to think that he's going to instantly come on the scene and he's just going to be busting out and having gangbusters. That's not going to happen. He has time to develop. He has time to improve. But saying that all of a sudden because of the fact that this guy hasn't done anything, that somehow that makes this trade look bad, that's ridiculous. He's a 7th round draft pick. Most 7th round draft picks don't make the team. So again, I don't see the problem here. Especially when you take a look at the fact that with the Vikings and J.J. McCarthy, the Vikings drafted him to be their next franchise quarterback, obviously. But here's the thing. His career's already started off on the wrong foot because when you have a severely torn meniscus in your knee, you're forced to miss your entire rookie season, and then you have to watch Sam Darnold's revitalization from the sideline. I mean, the point I'm trying to make here is that while you can say that a trade is wrong or was a bad move because of the two players in comparison that played the same position or the two players that were part of the trade, you cannot say that from a trade that was wrong, supposedly based on the compensation that you got versus what someone else got from the same compensation they received. What I'm trying to say here is that if you wanted to say that the trade was wrong because, the Vikings got better production out of Hockenson versus Laporta, that would be one thing. But that's not what's going on here. And as I've already proven quite plainly, there's no way you could make that argument. But if you're going to try and make the argument that because the Vikings got J.J. McCarthy, whereas we got Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin, and, Antoine Green, that's why we went wrong there. How did we go wrong? J.J. McCarthy hasn't even played a single football game yet. He hasn't taken one meaningful snap against an actual starting level defense. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think the Lions have done anything wrong. They might have, reached on one player as far as Broderick Martin, but you know what? They obviously believe in him. And again, if they believe in him, I believe in him. I believe that it will eventually work out. But again, you cannot compare players that have vastly different roles in regards to what they were supposed to be with their teams. J.J. McCarthy was supposed to be the next franchise quarterback. Hendon Hooker was never going to be the next franchise quarterback. Broderick Martin was never intended to be the starting interior defensive lineman. And Antoine Green was never intended to be a starting wide receiver for us. To try and make that as the whole basis of your argument, I'm sorry, that's just lazy analysis. And I don't think it's fair to compare that way. I don't think it's fair to make an argument that way. Just saying. But anyway, I've made my argument, I've presented my case, so I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things, like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also want to encourage y'all, please, to share this content. And I also want to encourage y'all, please, make sure you hit that bell notification icon at the bottom so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I hope y'all enjoyed the content. I hope y'all got something out of the content, gave you guys something to think about. That's truly what I try to do with every one of my episodes. And I also hope that everybody enjoys not only the content, but I also hope you got something in your life that you enjoy that makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.